You've got big, bold plans for creating an online business with your expertise. The possibilities are endless, but you need a software platform that has everything: courses, bundles, memberships, live streams, community integrations, a mobile app, and live tech support from real-life humans. Does that even exist? Yes! Introducing Marvelous, the world's most beautiful and easeful teaching platform. Check us out at heymarvelous.com.
Your gifts, your talents, that is your currency. That is how you can give and pour back into people. That's how you can, in my opinion, really impact people in the world the most, is to cultivate your gifts, cultivate that art, that light inside, and share it.
Have you ever dreamed of making a radical shift? What does it take to build a more intentional life? What is gained from reconnecting with yourself, with community, and with the natural world? I'm Alyssa Hessler. I've spent the last decade meeting with people all over the world who have made remarkable transitions in their lives. How did they do it? What did they sacrifice? And what have they learned? Stepping away from convention isn't easy, but we all have the power to reclaim the things that we've lost, to slow down, to change course, to create the life we want for ourselves and for future generations. The Urban Exodus podcast shares practical advice and inspirational words to embolden and guide you on your own journey. These are the stories of those brave enough to venture down the road less traveled. This is the Urban Exodus. Urban Exodus is community-supported programming. Please consider sponsoring an episode or making a contribution so we can keep these conversations going. The easiest way to contribute is to click the support button on the top of urbanexodus.com. You can also become a member of the Urban Exodus community to peruse our archives of hundreds of photo stories and interviews of people who left city life, or subscribe to Apple Podcast Premium to have access to bonus episodes, our rapid-fire interviews with guests, and our new mini podcast, Ditch the City, where I answer listeners' questions and offer practical advice on a whole myriad of topics. If you have a question for an upcoming episode that you'd like us to consider, please send us a DM on Instagram or through our Contact Us page. Thank you for helping me continue to do this work. I couldn't do it without all of you. And if you haven't already, we would really love it if you'd leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever service you listen on. And please recommend Urban Exodus to your friends. I'm excited to invite you to my conversation with Ronaldo Holmes, known by Holmes to all who know him. He is the person behind Holmes Finds Freedom on YouTube and Instagram. Holmes is a talented poet, educator, farmer, and nomad. He says that poetry saved his life, and he wants others to experience the healing power of spoken word. He had a bad stutter as a child and had a hard time communicating and making friends. He would write a lot of poetry and eventually discovered spoken word. Holmes went to his first open mic knowing that he would stutter and was terrified. And the host told him he had 2 options: stay on this stage and recite your work no matter how long it takes, or quit and walk off the stage. He stayed on the stage, and that changed his life. He began going back every week, and his stuttering got better until he was able to cure himself completely of it. This is a perfect example of the courage, passion, dedication, and creativity that Holmes approaches life with. Several years ago, he sold his home, left a career as a power plant technician, and set out on a journey of adventure and self-discovery. He wasn't feeling fulfilled in his life, and he didn't want to live out his days continuing to feel like something was missing. He traveled all over the United States and eventually found a southern city to settle in. He bought a plot of land and started growing food for himself and his community. During the pandemic, Holmes felt called back to nomadic life. He sold his property, bought a van, and embarked on a new adventure, spreading seeds, his farming knowledge, and joy in every community that he visited. He found his way to Mexico, working for a few urban farms before settling in a small rural farming community. He fell in love with the people and culture and the way of life in Mexico. Holmes also felt greater love, acceptance, and ease being a Black man in Mexico. He didn't feel like people looked at him differently because of the color of his skin. But with funds running out, Holmes made the difficult decision to return to the United States so that he could put in a plan to move to Mexico permanently. He returned to his power plant job and is continuing to live in a van so that he can save money. A passionate grower, Holmes hasn't let van life keep him from farming. When he returned to Connecticut, he put a call out to his community to see if anyone would let him grow food at their house, and someone offered their front yard. This summer, he grew a bunch of produce, and his goal is to build some passive income streams to sustain him for the long term and save enough money to buy a small parcel of land in Mexico where he can homestead and live off the land. This is a story about the healing effects of poetry, the community building power of growing food, and fostering courage, commitment, and vision to work towards your dreams. So I am very excited to have on the podcast today Ronaldo Holmes, known by most of his friends as Holmes. And I have been following you online for quite some time. And we just talked about this before we started recording, but I just really appreciate your passion and your kindness and your willingness to just put beauty and joy into the world. And I think that it's really infectious. And I feel it when I see the stuff that you create. So I'm really excited to have you on and to have you talk about your journey, because you've been on quite a few journeys as of late. So first off, I would love if you would just share a little bit of your backstory, kind of where you grew up and the paths that you've taken that have led you to where you are now.
Thanks for that. I'm grateful. I'm actually where I grew up in Miami, Florida right now. So I'm actually visiting my parents in Miami, Florida. And I grew up, in kind of a rough neighborhood in Miami, Florida, and kind of grew up, didn't have a lot of money, but had a strong foundation of family. So family came first, and it was very tight knit. And kind of growing up, I went to school, did okay with school, but I didn't go to college because I had to help my mother and my family kind of with the house. And I got introduced into kind of power plants technician, by like chance. A friend of mine, I was working at Walmart, and a friend of mine was like, hey, they got a job over here. And like maybe for 3 months, I was like, telling them, nah, I'm good. And after, eventually I went there and actually started a long career, about 11 years working in the power plant industry.
And what was that job like? What did it entail?
It was nothing. It was something I've never seen or experienced before. So it was a lot of big, large machinery, equipment, very hazardous environment. And for the first couple of years, I didn't really, it was just like a job. But it wasn't until I started to move up in the company where I started to really get passionate about the efficiency of power plant operations. It's a very efficient process. The garbage comes in, and you have to pay to have your garbage pulled in. Then you extract you extract the metals. You get money from that. It was just a very efficient process that I got very passionate about the efficiency of the power plant industry.
After you'd worked at this power plant for 11 years, you made a sudden move and you quit your job and you changed your kind of whole approach to life. I wondered what the catalyst was for that paradigm shift.
Well, everybody definitely thought I was crazy, leaving such a good job like that. But so it changed my view of success. I had the big house, nice car, the marriage and everything. And I was still unhappy. I didn't feel fulfilled because of some, healing that I needed, that I didn't even identify at the time, but that I needed. It put stresses on my relationship and my marriage. I got a divorce. And once I got a divorce, I was about 30 years old, and I started to really question everything, question what is really life, what is really happiness, like what truly is. And I started to identify that I am going to just go out there and do whatever that makes me feel fulfilled. Whatever, even if other people disagree, which they definitely did at first, but I am going to go and do whatever I believe is going to make me happy and make me feel fulfilled.
It's so wild because that is such a profound thing to come to that conclusion in kind of our current societal norms. Like, how did you build up the courage or kind of the bravery to step out of kind of society's expectations of what we are supposed to do?
Well, after, 30 years of my life kind of doing what I thought, would make me happy, and going in that process, I sacrificed a lot of my passions. I sacrificed a lot of things that I wanted to do, reaching this goal of, of happiness and success that I thought I would get that I never had. So what really terrified me the most was living my life without trying to do the things that I really wanted to do. But having those second guesses or those, I wonder if, that terrified me the most. I felt that it was for me to try doing something that I wanted to do and failing was a lot better than thinking, what if I ever tried doing that? So that's what kind of helped me just kind of go out on a limb and try things, because I was afraid more of regret for not trying it than actually failing trying to try it.
What did you do to prepare for taking this big leap? Were there things that you kind of got in a row to like make sure that you felt more comfortable stepping into this kind of new unknown?
After my divorce, I started from scratch. So I stayed at my parents' house for like 2 years, saved a lot of money, and then said, okay, it was like 3 places in the country I researched that had, low cost of living. And it was like Texas, Georgia, and North Carolina, where I felt comfortable at. Didn't want to go too cold at the time. The climate that was too cold. And it just ended up happening. It just drove me to Georgia. So after the 2 years, I was like, okay, this is it. Actually, a friend of mine, a childhood friend of mine, was living in Georgia, and I went to go visit him, and he was like showing me around, and I was like, nice, I can do this. And he told me, well, my job has an opening right now. And I said, well, I'm gonna put in for it. So on the visit, I literally put in for the job. So on the visit, I literally put in for the job, and when I got the job, I just told my current job, I was like, I gotta go. Like, I apologize. I didn't even give 2 weeks notice, which is crazy. I was just like, I gotta go. And I did. I just packed up my U-Haul and I left.
What was that transition like to Georgia, and what did you discover about yourself?
It was lovely. It was a lot of new beginnings. Even though I'm from the city, of Miami, Florida, I just really liked the greenery and nature. And Georgia was full of trees and green and nature. And I really felt at peace around that environment, especially for myself, just having so many thriving Black businesses in Georgia and the Atlanta area was something I have never experienced in Miami, Florida. So that was very empowering and encouraging for me to like, you know what? It's a lot of people who look like me is thriving out here, then maybe I would have a better opportunity.
So when did you start getting your hands dirty and growing food? I'd love for you to kind of talk about that process, because I know that that's become a real great passion in your life.
Yeah, so actually in Miami, Florida, when I had my property, I was married, and I did a little bit of growing, but also saying, I had to sacrifice a lot of my time, so I couldn't really dive deep into it. And when I went to Georgia, I was like, I identified the few things that I was extremely passionate about, and gardening was one of them, poetry was another. And I said, you know what? I'm going to invest in this. This is what I'm going to invest in. After working about 10 months at a job that my friend got me on, I saved up enough money to actually buy some property and closer to Atlanta. And that's when kind of it just started. Once I bought that property, it was actually a multi-living property. So I brought there, I had some people living in the units, and I started growing just in any piece of land I could on the property. It wasn't a lot of land at all, but started with the backyard and then the side yards and then the front yards. And then, eventually the community started to ask a lot of questions.
I think that people feel like there are blockades for growing or learning how to grow, especially if you're living in a city and maybe you don't have a lot of access to land. But you can grow a lot on a small piece, and you can at least like start to learn some of the mistakes that you're inevitably going to learn. I'd love to know like what, you said the community started asking questions. I'd love to know like what the response was and how you started to see like the ripple effects of just this thing that you love doing.
Well, one thing how I see growing and gardening, especially starting on like a clean slate, so like just new earth, and to me it's like a painter. So it's like it's art to me because I know what I have in my mind, what is going to happen, right? So I'm digging up the earth and I'm cultivating the earth, and for a lot of people that's a lot of sweat equity, and they're looking at me the first like few months like, what is this guy doing? Like every day he's out here with a shovel, he's in the sun. And they're looking at me like I'm a crazy person, and it's like in my mind, I know how it's going to turn out. So it's like, I'm okay with that. It's okay. Just like an artist starting with a plain canvas. So after, the community seen me for months, just putting all this sweat equity into the earth and building the earth and cultivating the earth and amending the earth. And then when summer comes around and the plants that I planted and the seeds are growing, it's like, wow, it's like a bigger reality because it's something that they didn't expect when they first seen me. So it became like larger than life. It came like, wow, like this is what all of that energy he was putting in for. And they really seen how much food that was being grown in a small area. And that's when the community started to ask me, can you teach me what you're doing?
No, that's amazing. That's what it is. It's like alchemy and it's artistry and it's like adding layers and it's investment and it's teaching you about patience and about that nothing is actually within your control. And so there's so many lessons that growing food can have in addition to nourishing your body and nourishing your community. I wondered how growing food has impacted your mental, your physical, and your spiritual health.
It has definitely impacted it. Growing food to me, or just growing and being into the earth, I like to say stewarding the earth. That is my peace. So, some people meditate in other ways. For me, cultivating the earth, stewarding the earth is my meditation. So the earth has taught me to like slow down. I used to be a really fast person, want to do everything fast. And, when you have to cultivate a piece of earth for like 12 hours, you go there, think you're going to grab that shovel and move 100 miles an hour. Like that earth and nature, it would teach you really, really something. Hey, that this is a marathon, not a sprint. If you keep going like this, you're not going to last. So it taught me to really take my time to embrace whatever I'm doing, embrace the moment. It really connected me and grounded me, after being when you're sweating and you're hot and a breeze comes. It taught me to like take that time to put the shovel down and just embrace the breeze and receive the breeze and just, identify how beautiful, that this breeze is coming to cool you down, then begin to work. It really taught me a lot about myself, like internally, just kind of working the earth, being grounded, having my hands in the soil, which is a part of healing, just kind of identifying that doing this work, stewarding the soil, rebuilding the soil is actually, we are healing each other. We are connecting and healing each other. So it really became like a huge part of my life to the point that, and even now in my journey, I don't feel complete if I don't have some kind of relationship with the soil.
Yeah. you just like summarized that experience in a way that kind of gave me goosebumps, but like that is so true. And it is meditation, and it's especially meditation, I think, for people that are used to moving very quickly and have gotten kind of swept up in the pace of things and feel like they're chasing a cart down a hill and they're never in front of the cart. Like it's this really nice way to reconnect, but it's still physical and like you're actually working at it. It quiets your mind. What advice would you give to people who are maybe living in a city or a suburb who don't have access to land on creative ways that they could get their hands dirty, that they could start to learn this on their own?
So I've actually had a lot of experience in this myself, growing on pieces of land that wasn't that large. And also 2020, we kind of started when the community started kind of gravitating and wanting to learn, and we outgrew my area, a piece of land. We started just to find what, we would call guerrilla gardening, and we would just find empty lots and grow. So I would say the first thing is to think outside the box, be the example. So your example would inspire, encourage, and also attract opportunities to you. So even if it's growing in pots, I would say somebody growing for the first time, start growing in pots, and then being creative, and grow whenever that you can. But we literally for 6 months during the growing season, every Sunday, we would pick either somebody's neighbor or friend or family member to have a yard we were growing, or it was to the point like we would just we'll scout abandoned lots and we would just like grow literally for 6 months. And it was crazy because the volunteers got more excited at like growing at these abandoned lots than anywhere else. And I'm like, this is not 100% legal, but they was just like so hyped and so on it. And by doing that, we actually acquired a grant just because, the word got around it was growing and that, the community was involved and we needed more land. So we actually got a grant to actually grow more on abandoned lots. They didn't know it 100%, but, that's what we did with the money. And I remember going to a urban farming event in my city. My city council of my city came to me. He was like, are you Holmes? And I was like, yes. And he said, I see what you're doing around the community. He kind of leaned in and he said, I see what you're doing around the community. And like when he said it, his face was serious. And then my face got serious. And then he was like, I support what you're doing. Keep doing the good work. And I'm not going to be in your way unless, somebody forces me to, and I'll always give you the heads up. And when he said that, it was just like, a breath of fresh air. I felt like I had the support. And actually, we became really good friends. And he reached out for a lot of things to me to kind of help. So I would say the first thing is just be the example, regardless if you have the resources or the land, your energy, your passion, your example would attract everything else, all the resources and everything else that you need. So it's definitely hard at first. I'm not going to tell you it was definitely hard starting, but just be consistent. Your example would attract the opportunity.
Calling all small business owners. Are you looking to expand your customer base beyond the reach of your local community? Speak to our loyal audience of over 38,000 listeners by sponsoring an episode of the Urban Exodus podcast. For more information, visit urbanexodus.com/podcast. And you don't have to grow fast too, just like you said with slowing down and growing stuff. Like it can be like a slow thing over time, but people take notice and taking over a vacant lot and filling it with food and adding abundance someplace that there had been no abundance. What did you see in your neighborhood? What were some of the effects this growing tidal wave created?
It really touched me in more ways than I identified. And it really helped me identify like the power and the healing of growing and just plants and the life and the energy that plants have and possess. And in East Point, where, we started growing and everything, it was a very bad neighborhood, like very bad neighborhood, had a lot of drug abuse. It was a lot of traffic, a lot of drug traffic going back and forth. And, that was one concern of me, starting these volunteering was the safety of the volunteers, but it was such a high respect for the garden and for everybody we were doing. It was almost like that was a protected space. And it was times like volunteers would come and they would say, you know what, it's so crazy that your lot feels like it has a force field, a different energy around it compared to everything else, and it just feels different. Like you go across the street, the energy is totally different, and you come here and you feel safe. One of the things that I would I would never forget, and it really, touched me, is that actually a local prostitute came to me and was like, you know what, that this neighborhood has a lot of depth, and your garden is life. And every time we walk past your garden, we feel like we receive life. When we see the flowers like that, it's a part of life. And I got really emotional as she said that, and identified. And that's when I really identified that, this thing of what people call gardening was more than just growing food. It was a lot more deeper.
It gives like pride and community to places. And I feel like there are a lot of communities out there in rural areas and urban areas, in suburban areas where like nobody talks to each other anymore. There isn't a sense of community, and like growing things together can be so impactful. So I know that you then embarked on this big adventure. You went on this journey, this kind of nomadic journey. I'd love for you to talk about kind of your time van lifing and traveling around and meeting new communities and kind of spreading this further.
Yeah, so that was real cool. It's like every part of my journey, I learn a different part of myself. And it's just like I grow into myself. And the van lifing was at first a little hard because I was a semi-hoarder, like, because being an urban farmer, you just collect whatever you can on trying to save money and, use whatever resources you can. So you would collect a whole bunch of things, for projects that you would eventually build, and just coming and having to really downsize to the point where you're only taking your essentials. It was extremely tough, but it was probably one of the most healing and freeing things I have ever experienced in my life. Because I didn't identify that a lot of these things that I collected over the years actually almost had me in prison in where I was at. I couldn't move forward. I couldn't try other things. I couldn't just adventure because these things was holding me back. It was tying me to a specific place. So when I cut loose all of those things, it was like this freedom. It's like nothing is holding you back. You have your bare essentials. You have everything you need. You can do whatever you want. And that was such a freeing experience, just being able to say, you know what, I'm going to go to Texas and see how everything works out. And in 2 months, Texas don't work out. Well, I'll go back to Georgia and we'll see how everything works out. And then after that, I said, well, okay, you know what? There's better opportunities in Connecticut. And let's go to Connecticut. And that's how the journey was. And every time that I stopped with a place, I build with community, I build with like minds, and just sharing your experiences and just with other like minds is really fulfilling. So it's been a great, freeing experience with van life.
I wondered, it's hard. I think that people feel like it's hard, especially as we get older, and, it's hard to make friends in new places. It's hard to step into a new place and just be out of your comfort zone. Do you have any advice for someone that might want to move into a completely different place, or might want to cut all of those ties that they have to the things that are holding them down in their life and build new community somewhere else?
I would definitely tell you it's extremely hard. It's definitely not easy, especially because a lot of times, even with myself, a lot of these things that you save for, that you collect, right? Those are things of false happiness. Again, society says, well, you know what? If you buy this, it'll make you happy. Or if you get this, it'll make you happy. So for a lot of these things might be expensive, and you may have saved or, worked towards a long time for these things. So now once you acquire these things, it's hard to say, well, this thing or things that I have worked for 5 years for, I'm going to let go and just go. That is very hard. That can be extremely hard for people. It's definitely not easy, but I think it has to just come to a point where it's either you're happy where you are at, or you don't feel happy and you don't feel fulfilled. And you're going to say, you know what? I'm not going to be living in regrets. I'm not going to be living into what if I would have just did whatever I think would have been freeing to myself, and take that jump and take that leap. And it's extremely hard. But from my experience, even through the ups and the downs, I would have never chosen differently.
That's amazing. That's profound. I think that like people romanticize van life. They romanticize going on the road and, seeing all the sights. What are some of the realities of it that like maybe people would overlook, just like people oversimplify country living or growing food, all of those things? What were the hard parts and what were some of like the things that you want people to consider from like safety perspectives or like making sure that you have all of the things that you need? What did that look like for you?
So I would definitely 100% say that van life is not for everybody. That is 100% like, I know it'd be a little disgusting, but if you don't feel comfortable peeing in a bottle, van life is probably not for you. And that's just some of the things, that you have to go to. If you're not comfortable, taking showers in public areas in your local gym, van life might not be for you. If you don't feel comfortable really downsizing to the point of, giving all of your things, only having a small few of clothes, and stuff to go, it might not be for you. So these are serious considerations, and also for extroverts. So if you're an extrovert and you like being around a lot of people and being social, van life might not be for you. This is seriously, like, this may be a thing. For me, it's a healing process because in my journey, I identified that I had to fall in love with myself first before I can truly love other people. So a lot of times when you are alone, when you are working things out, you kind of are forced to abandon your crutches, really abandon the easy way and really dig deep and really find happiness in yourself. So I would definitely say those things are hard. As far as some tips, I would say definitely put blackout tents on your van, black out your van as far as safety wise. I haven't had really any horror stories about safety or feeling unsafe. I have had maybe some people kind of look in the van, maybe curious about what this is, and the blackout tent so I can see you, but you can't see me. And usually if you just kind of shadow or rattle something in the van or turn on the light, they'll just startle them and then they'll just kind of run off. So those are some of the things. When I first moved to Connecticut, I was a little anxious because it was new to me. I didn't know where was the safe place for me to sleep. Didn't know like any safe places, but I just kind of figured it out and just kind of, I move by my spirit. So whatever that my spirit feels or whatever I feel comfortable or whatever there's something triggers or my spirit might say, hey, I don't know, this place feels too sketchy. I rely on that. Honestly, for me, I couldn't go back to renting. I think van life is probably the way I'm going to go. I'm passionate about off-grid living and self-sustainability. So to me, without actually having an off-grid homestead, this is the closest thing to experiencing that off-grid life is van life.
So even though you're in van life right now, you are growing food right now. And I'd love for you to talk about the garden that you have created. And that's community too. Like that's community gardening.
It's so crazy, especially coming from, my background and being an introvert, but wherever I reside for at the time, I reach out, social media is an amazing tool. I reach out to people and connect, and they allow me to like build gardens, and we kind of barter like their land for the food that we grow, which is like just amazing. So when I was in Mexico, we did the same thing. I just kind of reached out like, anybody want to allow me to build a garden? And it was like, sure, come on. And that like these experiences like are things that I have stories and that like I can remember and kind of go on and things that I would like always appreciate, until I get always these experiences and relationships that I've built with people that I can to this day go back and it's like family. So I went to Connecticut, I reached out and I said, well, would anybody want to, have a garden? And they was like, sure, so I came to their property and they had a big backyard that was shaded. And I was like, well, the best area right now is going to be the front yard. And she was like, well, sure, I don't like cutting the grass anyway. So I was like, okay, are you sure? Because when I build gardens, like it's going to be like a mini food forest. And she said, absolutely. So definitely started and just experiencing all over again, like, seeing the community again. It kind of brought me back when I was in Georgia, when I was like digging, all these holes and trenches and cultivating the soil and I can tell people walking every day, just watching like, wow, what is he doing? And to now seeing the abundance of food, it's very fulfilling. I'm grateful for the opportunity for every garden I build. I feel like, honestly, it's a child. It's like a baby. Every garden is a baby to me. I always want to come back. I always want to check on it. So it's been a very fulfilling experience to be able to grow wherever I'm at. Because to be honest, like I mentioned earlier, if I wouldn't be able to grow, that would, for me personally, that would probably be the hardest thing of van life.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people would like assume that that would be off limits to them, right? If they're traveling around, but it doesn't have to be. When COVID first hit, you went down to Mexico, and I'd love for you to describe your experience there and why you chose to stay there.
Yeah. So when COVID hit, I was like, okay, I didn't want to take the vaccine and anything. And I said, well, I'm just going to go to Mexico and just kind of try things out there. I did some research, and I said, I can probably, the cost of living was reasonable enough for me to kind of get by and stuff. And I went there. First, I went to a few touristy places, and it wasn't the experience or the lifestyle that I kind of wanted. I just wanted a more cultural experience. So I visited Carmen de Playa. I went to Cancun. I went to Merida, which was pretty cool. But then eventually that's when I just kind of went on social media and I was like, look, would anybody want me to kind of grow a garden in kind of a specific agriculture place in Mexico? And somebody said, yeah, sure, come on over. So I took like maybe a 48-hour bus ride across Mexico and went over there and went to like the countryside of Mexico, like cows. Everybody got a ranch. Everybody got animals, cows, goats, everything. And I pull up in there, and it has just been love. Like, anytime that I was in Mexico, I didn't feel any negative response to me, towards my skin or anything. And that's something that I identified really looking inside of myself, living in the United States, identify as a Black man, is that it was a lot of built up trauma I didn't even identify that I had in myself. Like, when I seen the police there it's a little different. They don't have like handguns, they have automatic weapons. So when you go there and see this, I would be afraid. And my friend will say, like, you don't have to worry about nothing. They're not going to mess with you. And that was just a relief. I didn't even realize that, every time I see any kind of law enforcement, how my energy feels, how I feel tense, how I feel anxious. And identifying going there, a lot of these feelings, it's just slowly started to just dissolve. Like I could have truly be my original and free self, like, and that was something that was very calming to me. And even to this day, like I miss it. Like I can just be me in its entirety. And that was okay. And it was accepted. It's a great experience. I'm there. I built beautiful relationships. I built gardens with local organic community growers there. I always got a home there anytime I want to go back. So Mexico, especially with the family-oriented culture, was something I fell in love with. It's not capitalistic. It's more revolved around family. And that's something that my spirit was driven to. It didn't matter how much money you had. The whole family works together. And as long as you had family, you were happy. And that's something definitely my spirit resonated with.
That's really beautiful. What made you decide to come back then from Mexico and return to Connecticut? What was the pull?
Well, the pull was I ran out of money. So after going through that, I'd made some bad decisions, some bad investments. I was like, okay, for the lifestyle that I want to live, I definitely want to buy some land here. And I don't have enough right now. So I'm going to go back to the States, save some money, and then come back. So that was one of the things I would say, for any expats out there or potential expats, I would say one of the things that I would recommend is to have some kind of residual income. So if you do plan on being an expat, really have some, it doesn't have to be a lot, but at least something coming in. So that was one of the lessons I definitely learned in that experience.
I feel like you're super creative when it comes to growing gardens and embolden people to start with what they have and look to repurposed materials or places they might not expect to find gardening stuff. What are some of your favorite like frugal gardening tips to get people started if they don't have like a lot to invest in growing?
I'll say one of my favorites is, or most easiest and simplest is 5 gallon bucket. So I think, I know some people starting there. It's easy to access a 5 gallon bucket, fill it up with some soil, put some drainage holes at the bottom, and just, water it and put it in a sunny place. And you can definitely start there. And once you start there and you start learning and gaining experiences with that, then you would feel more comfortable with, ingrown gardening. So I would say 5 gallon buckets. One of my favorite things that maybe out of the box people wouldn't think of is shopping carts. So that's something I definitely grew in. In Georgia, we had it's kind of crazy, but maybe 15 shopping carts. And because we didn't have a lot of land and soil, so we would line the shopping carts up, fill it up with soil, and grow pretty much anything in it. So that is something, out of the box. But as far as a 5 gallon bucket to a shopping cart, but anything that can hold and drain soil, you can possibly grow.
Wow, shopping carts is so smart. You could even kind of half bury it in the ground to grow potatoes and then just pull the whole thing up.
We definitely grew potatoes in shopping carts. And the great thing about it is because once it's spinach, you just dump the shopping cart off, the potatoes is right there. Not only that, it's like a mobile garden. So you can actually move the shopping cart if you need it. And it's really great for elders because it's elevated. So you don't have to abandon stuff right there. So I'm thinking out of the box, but shopping carts is one of my favorite ways of growing for those reasons.
And you oftentimes see shopping carts abandoned places, and grocery stores are always updating their shopping carts. And so that's so smart. I love that. I've been to a lot of different gardens built in cities, and there was one that was built in Baltimore outside of an old folks home, and they had those raised beds, but a shopping cart's the perfect solution for that. And you don't have to go and source lumber. That's genius. What's your favorite thing to grow? What do you love to grow the most?
So it's two things. One thing I identified, sunflowers and watermelons are my absolutely things to grow, just because the energy that they have, especially out of a sunflower. A lot of people love sunflowers. In the community I was going in Georgia, people came to me and say, the first time I seen a real sunflower was in your garden, which really touched me. And it's just the energy that a sunflower have and a watermelon. For some reason, I don't know what it is, but once you grow a watermelon, everybody think you're the best gardener ever. I don't know what it is.
It's because they're so big and delicious.
People are fascinated about watermelons. So if you grow watermelon, you'll be the greatest gardener on your block. So those are the two things I really enjoy growing.
I tried to grow a watermelon here in Maine. It was this big. I need a greenhouse or something. It just doesn't get warm enough. I mean, it was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted, because tomatoes and most fruits and vegetables, but especially tomatoes, a watermelon tastes completely different that you grow yourself compared to something that you get at a grocery store. Just tastes completely different. So much sweeter. I don't know if it's because they harvest them too quickly and they transport for a long time or what it is. You can taste the love that's put into it, and the time.
Yes.
And sunflowers are just they're the sunflowers.
Yeah.
And so bees are always buzzing around them. This is the first year I planted a whole row of sunflowers in the back of my garden. And some of them, I'm 6'2". Some of them are 4 feet above my head. And they just are so amazing. I just love to look at them. So I completely resonate with those. Let's move into your art, because I know that you have said that poetry has really saved your life, and you are a very talented and passionate weaver of words. And I'd love for you to kind of share your relationship with poetry and how it's helped you process and emote your feelings.
Growing up, I had a pretty rough childhood, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm an introvert. I had a very bad stutter growing up. I didn't talk very well. I always would stutter before I talk. I used to get picked at a lot. And so I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't want to talk to people because every time I talk, I used to get picked at. So for many years, I would just be silent. I had a small group of friends. I was okay with that. I was okay with being, a loner, okay with being introvert. That was cool. And I remember as I got older, around my early 20s, and I would go to parties and go other places, social events, and see everybody talking, smiling, and have a good time. I wanted to experience that. Growing up, not basically, not using my voice, I would put my thoughts and my emotions and whatever I thought into writing. So whatever that I didn't express verbally, I would express it in writing in the forms of poetry. And I had a lot of poetry books. And I remember, in my early 20s, I first was introduced to spoken word poetry. And I didn't know it was a thing. And I went to the first spoken word and I was just like simply amazed. And one time, it actually, after a few months, I gained up the courage to go on stage, with a stuttering problem. And I went on stage and was stuttering. I couldn't get any words out. I was super nervous, super anxious, and, just really grateful for the host at the time. He came, he said, look, you have two options. He said, you can finish this poem. You can take however long that you need, how much time you need. You can finish this poem or you can walk off the stage. And I said, you know what? I'm going to finish this poem. So I was on the poem. I stuttered through the poem. And, as I got through the poem, it got better. And I kept coming back. And every week I would come back. And every week, my stuttering would get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better to the point where, I wasn't stuttering anymore. I explained to a lot of people, now they kind of see me and they're like, wow, you talk well, or we like your poetry, or we like your energy on your videos. But I was like, this is not common for me. Like, this is me coming out of the box. I learned I always knew how to talk. But I tell people I didn't learn how to communicate until I was 30 years old. I didn't know how to express my feelings and my emotions into words until, I was getting up to be an older man because of just my stuttering. So poetry actually saved my life in a way that I was actually able to live the life that I wanted to live and express myself, in a normal manner. So I am grateful for poetry. That is definitely one of my loves with gardening. Poetry and gardening is one of my healing and one of my outlets.
I just wanted to give an enormous thank you to all of you who have made contributions to offset the production costs of this podcast. It means so much to me that you find enough meaning and value to pledge your support to keep this going. If you haven't had a chance to contribute, we've made it really easy for you. Just click the support button on the top of Urban Exodus website. You can also get access to bonus episodes, rapid-fire interviews, and our new mini podcast, Ditch the City, by signing up for our Apple Podcast Premium. Or you can become a member of the Urban Exodus online community, where you can access hundreds of photo stories, interviews, tutorials, videos, and more. Find out more by visiting the membership page on urbanexodus.com. I think that art has the real capacity to be a mirror and to heal. And I think that, it's not a high priority, and art is being cut from a lot of schools. And it's like something that people aren't encouraged maybe necessarily to do. What advice would you give to people who heard your words about how poetry has helped you? I feel like creativity is a muscle, just like you having to come every week to practice at it. What advice would you give to them to just get started and experiment?
Embrace your creativity. Embrace your individuality. Cultivate it. Your individuality, your creativity, your art, that's your light. That's a part of your gifts. And I know in this society, currency like money is what people kind of see value of. But really, if you take away money, your gifts, your talents, that is your currency. That is how you can give and pour back into people. That's how you can, in my opinion, really impact people in the world the most, is to cultivate your gifts, cultivate that art, that light inside, and share it. So I would definitely say just embrace who you are, embrace all the gifts that you have, cultivate that, and then share it.
I mean, you've kind of talked about it in the last question, but, how have your ideas of money and success kind of shifted over the past few years, making this transition?
One of the reasons, that I really love Mexico is because, over there, they identify kind of more your talents and your gifts as currency more than just money. Like you can have more, you can have value with not just having money. And that's something that I kind of resonate and relate to. Like I identify you need money to live and do certain things. But I think, out of the biggest scheme of things, the universal law of things, your currency is your gifts. That is whatever that you are gifted with, whatever your talents are, whatever that is. So I see those right now are, in my opinion, is what I value as, a currency, is a person's, whatever that your gift is. Like, we can barter. You don't have to come with me with money. You can barter whatever your gift is. And that's something that I practiced and encouraged when I was urban farming in Atlanta. Was like, I didn't sell any food. I didn't believe in selling food. I believe in bartering your gifts. So if I'm not really good at writing grants, but if you are a grant writer, then you can write grants, and I would provide you with as much food as you need, and we can barter like that. So you are using your gifts as currency, and that's what really I resonate believe in.
Absolutely. And I think that, like, weathering the future of this world that we find ourselves in right now, like that local resilience, that exchanging of goods, having things where they are, is so important, because we've seen all of the fractures just in recent years of like these systems of convenience that we've been so reliant on, and that they can be taken away, or a premium can be put on them so quickly so that it's not affordable for people anymore, or it excludes them. And so I really appreciate all of the energy that you're putting into teaching others and getting them excited about taking back the reins of things, because we're only really like a generation or two removed from a time when most people were growing at least some of their own food, And beyond that, like, really that practicality of reusing things and like thinking about what purpose could this thing have that I might just throw away, thinking about that for a moment. So yeah. As someone who projects so much good and energy into the world, I wondered if you had any advice for manifesting positivity and gratefulness into your routines so that you don't get stuck focusing on the many problems that we have in our current times.
I can only speak for myself and my practices. And one thing is just like remaining in gratitude. So just be appreciative for what you have and embrace the present. So I think that's something that, we kind of, especially me in the past, kind of haven't did, always thought about what I could have done better. What if I would have done this? And just being grateful for my experiences and embracing the present of what I'm going through right now, because that is going to help you. Whatever that you're going through, good or bad, is going to help you in the future. It's going to help you manifest your future. So embrace that process, because it's going to be, you're going to understand it. You're going to need it in the future. So that's one thing that I do, is just, try to stay in gratitude, try to just embrace whatever I'm going through in the present, just looking forward to manifesting in the future, staying in positive energy, think positive thoughts, being around positive people. These are things that I've learned that are very, very important. Just kind of, if you have negative thoughts or being around negative people, then it's going to be, in my experience, harder to attract what you truly want in your life. So just stay in positivity, embrace the present, and be great.
I wondered, as somebody that's traveled so much in recent years, what, if any, effects of climate shifting and climate changing have you noticed? Because you work with the land, you are paying attention to the seasons. Have you noticed things in the different places that you visited now?
Yeah, so I think that is like one of the most things that I've noticed, actually, stewarding the land and for so long in so many places, as identifying climate change. Like, it's really getting hotter. Like, it's legit. Like, frost is usually a lot later in the year than it traditionally is. The summers are super hotter than it traditionally was. It's been, you had to adjust. And even living in Georgia, like, I've seen where I've had to adjust some growing techniques, just trying to combat climate change, and having to have talks with other farmers about this. And they was like, yeah, like, we identify what we're going through, problems, things that we grew abundantly 5, 6, 7 years ago, we have to change and do other things, to actually for the same amount of abundance. So definitely identify, it's definitely a real thing. And you can identify that when you are stewarding the land, and identify, you got to put shade cloths, on your fruits and vegetables if you're in a very hot climate, or just like, you identify that frost or the winters are taking a lot longer to come, which can be helpful in a way in some climates, but you just identify like things are changing and you have to adapt to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they're manifesting in different ways. So it's so hard to kind of stay on top of it too. And again, I mean, that is a real reason why kind of everyone who can or has the interest should just start learning how to grow a few things, because it's just like, the way our agriculture system is set up right now, it's very few people growing for many. And if there are huge blights, then there just won't be as much food for everyone. So, yeah. In your wildest dreams, Holmes, what does the future of humanity look like?
Everybody working together, self-sustainable. One of my all-time dreams, and even things I try to implement when I was, on agriculture boards, is just having where, each community growing something. That is something that even, visiting and traveling to the islands, it kind of is, like everybody has their own garden. They're always growing something. Like there's not, community gardens is not really a popular thing in islands and other cultures because everybody grows. So you would always have an abundance. And if you're growing tomatoes and the other person is growing cucumbers, you would just barter each other. So for me, being in a place where everyone is growing, everyone is sharing, everyone is embracing their individuality, their lights, their creativity, and they're using their gifts as currency. That to me is the world I would love to live in.
That is the world I would love to live in as well. The last few years have been extremely difficult on so many levels. And I wondered what this time has taught you and how you are carrying that into your work in the future.
To really, again, embrace the present. So really embrace the present, be grateful for everything that I'm going through, that I'm working towards, and just being able to just really, live for the now, I guess, is what I'm learning. I'm a big person in preparation and planning, and that's one of the big reasons why I came back to the States, so I can prepare for a long time living. And now I'm kind of even thinking, well, what if I just go do it now? What if I don't need to have all my ducks in a line in a row? What if I could have half of the ducks aligned and just go figure it out while I'm there? Just like living in the now. So that's something where, I'm learning right now from just everything that's going on, is just embracing the present and starting to live in the now.
Are there any exciting things on the horizon for you from either a personal or business perspective that you'd like to share? And how can people support the work that you're doing, learn from you, follow along on your journey?
Absolutely. So definitely have some exciting things. I'm working on some online classes, teaching people how to grow, indoor gardening, outdoor gardening. But also what I'm also doing is working on some van builds. So I upgraded to a different van, and I will be decking this van out. So it will be having everything: shower, bathroom, bed, everything, kitchen, and also just kind of building myself. First time teaching myself, a lot of YouTube. So I'll be also, recording this, tracking my journey on YouTube and providing courses in the near future. And then basically once this van is done and finished, then I'm thinking that I will be ready to be taking this van up to Mexico and just starting this new chapter in Mexico. So everybody can find me at Holmes Finds Freedom on Instagram and Holmes Finds Freedom on YouTube.
Oh, that's awesome. I am so excited for you to get back to that place. I think that there's a real thing, and I've heard this throughout this project. Now I've interviewed hundreds of people who've done this, but when you go to a place and it just feels like home, and it just feels like you have to be rooted there, and there's such a power, and once you're planted in that place, that's when you really bloom. So I'm really excited for that. It has been just an absolute pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for all of the wisdom that you've shared, for sharing your beautiful story. I think that so many people feel scared and have that embedded scarcity mindset of, my dreams will be in the future. And I really appreciate that you have had the courage to just be like, I'm going to grab it and I'm going to go for it, because we really don't know how much time we have here. So such an absolute pleasure and honor to have you on. And I hope that I get to come to Mexico one day and see what you have created there, because I'm sure it's just going to be so beautiful, because everywhere you land, you grow. And that's amazing.
Give thanks.
Thank you again, Holmes, for joining us on the show. Some of my key takeaways from this episode. First, growing food benefits not only the cultivators, but also those witnessing the alchemy and payoffs and beauty of your hard work. It fosters greater community pride, togetherness, and collaboration. Even if you don't have a place to grow, state your intention to others, and you will likely be presented a path. Second, nature is a teacher if we choose to tune in and listen. Working with nature requires us to pace ourselves, pay attention, and find appreciation in the little things. We are not meant to live in this frantic pace that many of us are accustomed to. Getting your hands in the soil or spending time outside the man-made world is incredibly healing and therapeutic. And lastly, we acquire so much stuff in our lives, and that stuff can be a tether, preventing you from living the life that you want to live. Downsizing your possessions can be a tremendously freeing experience, and it can start you on a journey towards a new and more adventurous way of living. Hi, friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Urban Exodus podcast. This is a listener-supported program that is only made possible through your continued support. And if you haven't already, we would really love it if you'd leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever service you listen on. And please recommend Urban Exodus to your friends. An enormous thank you to my incredible producer, Simone Leon, and my amazing editor, Johnny Saul, and my music man, Benjamin Bethurum. And thanks to all of you for listening. I'm Melissa Hessler, and this is the Urban Exodus.